Good morning. This is Sunday morning with Brother Van, number 8. Last Sunday morning I discussed with you some information that's in the Bible that tells us that the Bible is really what it says it is and what we have believed all these years that it is. One of those things is the Bible prophecy. We know that we have seen the Bible prophecies happen right before our eyes, and we are seeing them happen as we speak in our world today. Another thing that I discussed with you last week was the finding of the Dead Sea Scrolls at Qumran and how they've been carbon dated to between 1900 and 2300 years old. So we know the Bible is a very old text, and it has been rewritten and translated into versions, but still the wording in most of those versions is basically the same. This version that I'm using right here is the King James Version, which is the one I use mostly. I do believe that other versions of the Bible are okay. Matter of fact, we have told people in the different places we've ministered as missionaries, when they've asked the question, what version of the Bible do you recommend? I've always said, whichever one you will read. And so that could be the NIV or the New Century or several others. So there are several versions of the Bible that are very real and legitimate and good to use. One short story I would like to share with you this morning is about 20 years ago, I guess it was. There was a group of us that had gone to St. Petersburg, Russia to build a church, or to help build a church. And we were on our way home. We had to overnight in Amsterdam, and we had a hotel room in The Hague. And the morning we were to fly out back to New York, I remember we were sitting in that dining room of that hotel room eating breakfast, and we were discussing the power and the knowledge and the wisdom of God. And that dining room in that hotel was a glass room, like a solarium, and the stories high of the building were probably about 10 stories high. And this solarium room went up the glass roof at an angle of maybe 45 degrees and intersected the building. And the wall of the building, which was the inner wall of the dining room, was probably 25 or 30 feet high. And the building, the glass room, was probably about 50 feet long. And we were discussing the power and the omniscience of God. And one of the guys with us asked a question. He said, if I took a marker or a pencil and I drew a circle on that big wall right there, and that wall, one could have drawn a circle on that wall probably 25 or 30 feet in diameter, and we said that that circle contained all of the knowledge and wisdom of God, and then if I gave you that pencil or marker and told you to draw an image of your knowledge and wisdom, what image would you draw? And I said, well, I'd take that pencil and a fine piece of sandpaper, and I'd sharpen that pencil lead down just to a needle point and put just a little speck on that wall, because my level of knowledge and wisdom compared to God's is just nothing. And so I've thought about that over and over all the years, and one thing that I would warn anyone not to do, including myself at times, is to try to match wits with God. God tells us information that we have no other way of knowing in the Bible, and that's the kind of information that I want to talk about here over the next few weeks. Today I specifically want to mention some underlying factors that are in the Bible. One thing that I have noticed on specific passages that I have read maybe numerous times, every time I would read them, maybe I would get a different meaning from that passage. And I want to discuss a couple of those with you today. And a couple, too, is not enough to give you an idea of how many there really are. There are literally thousands of these examples in the Bible. But one that I would draw your attention to is in Exodus chapter 25. I find it really interesting that the Bible deals with and talks about so many building projects, construction projects, such as the building of the temple, the King Solomon's temple in book of 1 Kings, and also the building of the wall in Nehemiah around Jerusalem, and the rebuilding of the temple in Ezra. And I find those studies very interesting and intriguing, because I have a background in construction work and in building things. In Exodus chapter 25, there are instructions that God gave the Hebrew people for the building of a box, and that box is called the Ark of the Covenant. Now, possibly you've seen the movie, the Indiana Jones movie, Raiders of the Lost Ark. That is the box that they were looking for, that Ark of the Covenant. It is the box that the Hebrews built to contain the stone tablets that Moses went up onto Mount Sinai with the 10 Commandments on them, etched by the finger of God and brought back down. And so God gave specific instructions for the building of that ark, of that box. And he told them to build that box, that ark, 2.5 cubits long. Now, a cubit is the distance from your elbow to the tip of your finger. We average that on people and say it's 18 inches. We're going to call it 1.5 feet. So 2.5 cubits would be 45 inches. And he told them to build it 1.5 cubits high and 1.5 cubits wide, which would be about 9 and 18 would be 27 inches, about 27 inches wide and 27 inches high. That was the size of the box. He was specific on what size to build that box. He told them to overlay it both inside and out with pure gold. And that's a really interesting factor in the fact that God would tell them to overlay it with pure gold, and he told them to build cherubims out of pure gold and place on the lid of the box. And he told them how to place those cherubims, those angels, on the box. So it is very specific in some of the instructions that God gave the Hebrew people to build the Ark of the Covenant. Now, one thing we know at this point in time is that that ark has never been found. Archaeologists have dug and looked for many years trying to find it. I know where it is, or at least I think I do. I think it is in one of the caves under Mount Moriah, under the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem. I think what happened when the Romans started destroying Jerusalem in 70 AD, that the Hebrews took it and they put it in one of those caves, and now they can't dig for it because it's under that Muslim mosque and the Muslims won't allow it. But I think that's where it is. I could be wrong, of course, but that's my opinion, I suppose, in this case. Another thing that God told the Hebrew people in the instructions of building the ark was the kind of wood to use. Now, that's what I find interesting because I've worked with wood quite a lot, actually for over 60 years. Matter of fact, I think my first woodworking project was probably a shelf that I built under my dad's instructions and help when I was probably about 10 years old. So I find the working with wood to be very interesting. He told them to build it with a wood called sheen-team wood. That's the way it's pronounced in Hebrew, which is a type of acacia wood. I have seen many acacia trees in sub-Saharan Africa, and most of the ones that I've seen have been really crooked and gnarly and didn't appear to be fit for anything. But when you look at the characteristics of acacia wood, you find it is very dense, it's very tough, it's very durable, it's very resistant to rot, it's very resistant to decay. And so I think that's the reason, I believe that's the reason that God told the Hebrews to build the ark with acacia wood, so it would last. That's another reason why I believe it is still in existence somewhere. And one thing that we know is that, or I believe, I don't know it, but I believe that someday it will be found. I think it's just a matter of time, and when that happens, it will be the greatest archaeological find in the history of the world, bar none. There's no question that it will be. But those characteristics of acacia wood, that's part of that underlying meaning that I see in the Bible. First of all, I see acacia wood as being a very, in my part of the country here, a very rare type of wood. And it's being tough and durable. I think that tells us that we need to be tough and durable. We know that Christian persecution is growing at an alarming rate around the world. I read not long ago that a Christian is killed every 11 seconds somewhere in the world because of their decision to follow Christ. And so I found that to be very alarming. So we know that persecution of Christians is going to continue, and it's probably going to accelerate. Well, that's Scripture. It tells us that it will. We have to be tough. We have to be durable in our containing of the gospel, of the 10 Commandments, of the teachings of God, of this book. One thing that we know for sure is that he has given us a great gift in giving us the Bible and this tremendous amount of information that it contains. We are the containers. I find it interesting what Ananias was told by Jesus in Acts chapter 9, when he was told by Jesus to go to a street called Straight, to a house of Judas, and lay his hands on Saul so that the scales would fall from his eyes and he would regain his sight. And Ananias didn't want to do that because of Saul's reputation. And Jesus said to Ananias, he is my chosen vessel. He is my chosen vessel. And a vessel is a container. And so that's what we are. You are a chosen vessel. You have information in you that can change eternity for someone. And that someone may be very close to you. You just never know. So there are so many implications about the fact that God told the Hebrews to build the ark with acacia wood, and I find that extremely interesting. Another example I would like to mention to you concerning Bible prophecy and scripture and underlying implications within the Bible is in the Lord's Prayer. In Matthew chapter 6, beginning with verse 9, Jesus taught the disciples how to pray. He said, pray ye therefore. In other words, this is the way you are to pray. And he started out and he said, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. He was telling them where God was. He was addressing God as the Father, the hallowed God, that one that is completely 100% righteous and perfect and totally omniscient, omnipotent, and omnipresent. He is the 3-O God. He is everywhere. He knows all. He contains all wisdom and knowledge, and he is all powerful. And so he is addressing God as who he is, the creator of the universe, the creator of us and everything that's in the universe. These trees that you see behind me, that wind that's starting to blow up in those trees is created by God. We have found that when we look at the next verse in the Lord's Prayer, verse 11 in Matthew chapter 6, and this is the one I want to really call your attention to here, is he says, give us this day our daily bread. I want you to notice here what Jesus is not asking for. He is not asking for a steak and all the trimmings and strawberry pie for dessert. He's asking for his daily bread, which is nothing more than sustenance. The only thing that Jesus is teaching us to pray for here is for God to sustain us. If you are praying for a new car or a bigger, nicer house or bigger, nicer clothes or more money or power or prestige or anything of that nature, you probably missed the point with the Lord's Prayer. I know that many churches now are starting or ending their services with a reciting of the Lord's Prayer, and I'm afraid that many read right over that verse 11, give us this day our daily bread, and never think about what it really means. And so when we start looking at these hidden meanings, these meanings that we have to read several times to see, we start to understand that the teachings of the Bible are much deeper, much more complicated, much more intense than any man will ever know or understand. We, people like me, for example, we regard the study of the Bible as a lifelong endeavor. It's not something that's ever done. It's not ever complete. And so what I would say to you and remind you of here is that always be alert for, be aware of the fact there are underlying implications in the Bible. And when I think of Matthew 6:11, daily bread, I also think of John 10:10. In John 10:10, Jesus said, I have come that you may have life and have it more abundantly. That has been so drastically misinterpreted. So many have thought that meant earthly riches, and it does not. the abundance that God, that Jesus is referring us to here is a spiritual abundance. It is an abundance of eternity. It is the abundance that He provides for us. And so be careful in misassuming that something means one thing until you've really prayed about it and thought about it, because it's a very deep subject, the Bible. Over the next few weeks, I'm going to be discussing with you the Bible prophecy. I'll talk more about the persecution of Christians and the prophecy that's happening right before our eyes right now as we speak. Thank you very much for being with me. I hope to see you again next Sunday with number 9. This is number 8, and this will be published for this coming Sunday morning. Thank you very much, and have a great day. Bye.